Welcome back. Today we're taking you to Tulsa, 1967, as we're talking about the North American touring production of The Outsiders. But before we venture into the story and characters, like, follow, and subscribe to us at bsb.insider on all social media platforms. Spoiler warning, if you haven't seen The Outsiders yet and wish to keep your great expectations without any prior knowledge, pause this video and return once you have seen it. Joining us today is special guest, the one-of-a-kind actress that needed a good cry, so she decided she might as well do it with this show, Emily Brown. Thank you so much for being here, Emily. How are you doing?
Doing great. Excited to chat.
So I have to say that we are in an interesting predicament here because, not predicament, that's the wrong word. We're in an interesting situation because I feel like you've had RJ build the show up. You've had Clay build the show up. You've had a lot of people tell you how great the show is, and you're finally getting to see it for the first time for yourself, right? You have not seen it before?
No, I'd not.
Whew. So what did you know about The Outsiders before coming to the show?
So I, and everyone else ever when they were in 7th grade, was forced to read the book. And usually when you're forced to read a book, it feels like a chore. But The Outsiders was one of the books that didn't. It's just so good. And then, you get to watch the movie in class. And after Clay went to New York and saw the production and loved it, when he came back, I was like, have you even seen the movie? What? You're missing out. And so we watched the movie again. So I've seen it pretty recently. But I noticed my English teacher definitely cut out some of the parts of the movie, which good. But it was nice to find new things about it. But it's always been cherished.
I think that, I think RJ, you read it too, correct? I'm trying to remember. We recorded our other podcast for the other one, the Broadway version, like a year ago. So it's hard to remember exactly what we talked about in that one. But you've seen it, RJ, right?
Yes.
Well, no, you've read it. Of course you've seen it. We were there together. You watched me cry hysterically in a Broadway theater like it was my fucking job.
Correct.
Rent is due.
Listen, Emily, we were there and the person in front of me turned around and asked me if I was okay. Asked me if I was all right because I clearly was not right. I think part of it was that RJ and I were sick at that point of our trip. We were physically not doing well. And so I think emotionally, I was just like, I'm going to cry. And for anybody who knows this story, my mom, when I was in 7th or 8th grade, I was super sick, and I once cried to an episode of Dora because I was watching Dora as I fell asleep, and I cried because she wasn't listening to me about where to go on the map. So clearly I can just cry at the drop of a hat when it comes to being sick.
You have such a big heart, Brian.
I try. And I truly went into this show at the Fisher thinking that I'm not going to cry. We're on home turf. We're not going to have an emotional reaction. We're going to do okay. And then I spent...
By we, he means himself, because I knew that he was going to be a mess. He just didn't think he was going to be a mess, which is so funny to me. But anyway.
You had no... You thought I was going to just melt into a pile of tears? You had no faith in me that I could remain strong here?
No.
This feels slightly blasphemous.
Was I wrong?
Hey, sometimes strength is showing vulnerability. It's okay.
I think that what is really telling about, I think what the reason why I have such an emotional reaction to the show is the theme of family. I think is a really big one here. And what I love about the show is that it doesn't just do what is blood family, but also does what is your found family.
Yeah.
I think it's a queer man that always gets to me because found family is just as important as real family, as we have. I mean, I had a pretty good relationship with my family and things didn't fall apart. But you see this thing, as a specialist of a therapist who specializes in LGBT, you see the story over and over again. And so I think that there is an emotional reaction to the fact of you're dealing with what is family and who is family. What about this theme do you feel really stood out to you, Emily, as you're kind of going into the show?
Yeah, I mean, a family is so big for me because my family is so close. And I think that what we talked about in Prince of Egypt, those emotional connections to your family, that is what hits me. And that found family trope in movies and books and everything, it gets me every single time. Because even though you hope that your blood is always there for you. Finding the people around you and building that community is so big. And we see that like with the greasers for sure, but also with the socias. Like they're both tight and they both have each other's backs, whether they're in the right or the wrong.
For sure. I mean, like you do truly. People like to paint the socias as bad. And when I was talking with some of the people from the show, they were like, what I love about the show is there's really like a lot of gray area, and the fact of like, it is truly about them finding their family and finding their group and their bond. Which is something actually we talked about when we saw the Broadway version of this as well.
Yeah. Well, in stepping into and owning, like, I think so many people, the show is so emotional because so many people don't necessarily lead what we would consider like a mainstream life or living. There's so many types of families. Yes, we talk about chosen family. Like I think like I'm adopted. I think of people who have that experience. You have fostering. Just like there's so many variations. And so I think that this show could be interpreted in so many ways in regards to the people that you find closest to you, and what they mean to you and really, I mean, throughout your life.
And I think what really stands out about those ties is like they're almost all trauma bonded, but that is what brings a lot of people together. It's like trauma or love. I mean, before we even start the show, we have the fact that the Curtis brothers have lost their parents. That's a big driving force for where they're kind of at. You have Ponyboy, who is definitely the dreamer of the three. He wants to believe that they're still good in the world. You have SodaPop, who is the hot one. And then you have Daryl, who is... No, you have SodaPop, who literally is, I think, the epitome of like the needing to stay strong for your family, but really having that heart of gold on the inside, and just trying to remain such a steadfast branch of the family, but falling apart slowly on the inside. And then you have Daryl, who just took on all that responsibility. And that's just one form of trauma that you kind of see impact this group of people as well. You see it in the greasers and how they're all bonded together because of horrible lives. And so I think that is kind of part of, again, why I was so emotional, is that like this level of trauma that's kind of bringing them all together, and how you kind of feel that throughout the show.
Well, in those relational connections, like you just mentioned, I even think of sibling like stature, like the eldest and the youngest and the middle child, like how much of ourselves do we see in these characters in regards to feeling like we owe our family something, or on the flip side, being like, love them but can't get away from them quick enough. Like there's just so many variations portrayed throughout this show, I think on both sides, not just, I mean, obviously we're focused in on the Curtis brothers, but we have those dynamics also within the two groups, and or quote unquote on the other side of the tracks, with the socias.
And family dynamics are so like touchy. Any change can like really affect the behavior of everyone involved. We see that all of the time in education. Like a kid might be struggling for a million different reasons, and you gotta meet them where they are. And I think that's what at least the core three brothers are trying to do with each other. They're trying to meet each other where they are. And of course, like Daryl is feeling like he's carrying everything when it feels like the other brothers are just trying their best. And then in Act 2, I felt like that switched a lot, where it's Ponyboy is the one that needs the help of his brothers and needs the support the most. And so they shift and they go. And the way that their flow works, I think, is very reminiscent of a strong family bond.
For sure. And even when you see the struggling in it, because like, let's take between Ponyboy and Daryl, like Ponyboy feels like his brother doesn't love him or understand him. And Daryl feels like Ponyboy is just being like a little bit of a brat, you know what I mean? And he just is trying really hard. And by the time you get into Act 2, you're really starting to see that like they kind of understand each other. Daryl's seeing why Ponyboy's drawn to the greasers, because he just wanted somebody to love him. And that's kind of what Daly did for him, and Ponyboy's seeing that Daryl's trying his best. And like Daryl like is hard because he knows he can be so much more. And I think that, again, like RJ, what you said is, depending on what role you are, what you said was very eloquently. It was very much Daryl. We could tell you're the eldest kid here. But there is that I think that's one of the dynamics that spoke to me. I'm a pony boy. I'm the baby. Like, I'm the one that always was the dreamer and always had the big ideas. And I have my sister who is the Daryl, who was just like, if my mom's not around, she was trying to wrangle me in and stuff like that. And so it felt very real, and it feels like they really understood these characters to kind of bring them together.
Oh yeah, you can definitely see pieces of personalities in everyone. It's like a tag yourself moment, you know. But because their dynamics are so smooth, I also feel like that's also like real life. Like we have these oldest sibling, middle sibling, younger sibling, like stereotypes, but I don't know. Maybe this is like kind of cracking open how like untrue those could be too.
Sure.
I don't know. It's very interesting. It's very real.
But when you look at something like the Greasers, I think too, I love that there's the relationship between Johnny Cade and Ponyboy, and then there's Dallas as well, and there's even like 2-Bit, like all these people. There is that really, like, again, they're all bonded by, they love each other way too much, you know, like, and they're over involved and they have too much grease in their hair, and that's something that we probably need to address with these people. But it does end up, you know, when you create that bond, it does lead to like that kind of, the other theme that really kind of spoke to me here is the us versus them, which I think is something that we're seeing a lot in today's society. We're seeing that a lot in every outlet, everywhere, where there's, you know, when you have such a strong core identity to a group, it does become the, you know, total bomb theory. We don't want to be the bottom, so we got to fight towards the top, you know? And so I think that is a lot of what's going on here. And so you can kind of understand where the Socias and the Greasers are both kind of coming from in these dynamics. Why do we keep exploring such a trope that is so commonly in so many different things? You think about you think about Grease, you know, you think about any other musical that I can't think of right now. But like, this is a common trope, this us versus them. Why do we keep exploring it?
I think maybe it's easier to face something that you don't like or you feel like is attacking you when you have like a team, I guess. And so people in like situations like that, it might be like helpful to envision people on their side and building that community eventually.
Great answer.
But it's also just like, yeah, man, look outside. This is it. It feels like right now, at least, everything is built to be divisive.
Sure.
And so it's like pick a team or your voice is drowned out.
For sure.
Well, in our society that is like so rampant with narcissism, like, and everyone's guilty of it. I don't think there's any party that isn't, no matter who you identify with or what group. But that feeling of like, poor me, like I am always the least of these things, to then ramp up and be included in a group and feeling, I mean, that's like one of the basic, like a feeling of belonging, right? Like our lives are just implicitly better when we feel like we belong to something. And whether or not we have truly invested our time or knowledge into knowing what the core of that thing is, which is, I think, when we tie this to life today, like that can be dangerous, because if you don't know what the actual belief of that system or that group is, then you could be supporting or representing something that you don't actually identify with. But then to acknowledge that you're potentially wrong, which in the case of The Outsiders, you know, when there's a lot of death happening and a lot of violence, and nobody's really they don't know how to take the accountability. And so, like, obviously, I should say obviously, if you don't know the story, there's a little bit of running around happening and hiding, and accountability is a little bit lacking. And so I think we all have been in a space where that's the case. Like, we don't know what the next step to do is. And so we either like bury ourselves with being within that group, or ignore the fact that it's happening because, again, trauma.
Yeah. I feel like that escaping accountability too, in like all of the violence and the running away. I feel like every single time I think about this story, that's when I remember that they're children.
Yeah.
And it like takes me that long because they're making such adult decisions and they're dealing with such adult things. And then all of a sudden something happens and they're scared because they're kids. And it breaks my heart.
You know, if we're going to jump into one part of that specifically, that I think really kind of sells that image, because Emily, you're so right. They are children. I think sometimes people forget that because they're like 19, 20-year-olds on stage playing these parts. Like in the book, Ponyboy is what, 12, 13? He's like a child. But one instance that always jumps out to me is when Daly gives Johnny Cade the knife. And like, it's a very like, you know, here's like a slightly older boy giving this younger boy a knife and being like, that if you need to use it, use it. And then also when he does use it, everything falls apart, you know? And granted, there is the accountability of like, okay, who was at fault there? Whose actions is right, who's wrong? Everybody's wrong in the end. And they do get to run away from that, you know, run away, change your hair, and you don't have to admit fault to what you did. But like, that's what a child would do. Like a child doesn't know how to take responsibility to that degree. Like this is like, you took somebody's life there was great loss here on all sides because of these actions, but none of us have a frontal lobe that are developed besides perhaps Daryl.
Yeah, right. And look at what he's doing, going to his 9 to 5 and doing laundry the whole show.
And like gave up the greasers, and that's a point that's actually like a sticking point for a lot of these characters is like, you gave it up, you gave up this lifestyle, and he's like, yeah, I have to raise a family, and he's the only one that has like that connection in his brain.
Well, and you think of as that plot line continues, the fact that we know that there's like literally no parents involved, right? Like, and specifically the mention of, and obviously the trauma from violence in the home or like absentee parentism, or obviously with the Curtis brothers, their parents passing away. So many dynamics change again when you throw that in. And also just like how incredibly heartbreaking. And Emily, I'm sure in education, you have parents who are extremely involved and those who are not. And there's the need, obviously, per the individual changes. But again, when you're talking about children, it is crazy to think, and obviously it's a book, we know, but
right.
And it's 1967.
To similar live experiences, that's incredible to me, because I think, but also from experience, like my parents were always extremely present. So to think that wouldn't be the case for, again, a child, a teen, that you're just carrying, that's brutal.
Yeah. So of course they're like searching for that next like authority figure. They're looking to Daryl, and when Daryl doesn't give them what they want, they go to Daly. And even though Daly is telling them what to do, he's like leading them down the wrong path. Is Daly doing that on purpose? No, because that's what he did to get by. And so he's saying, okay, I made it this far. What I'm doing can't be wrong. Might as well give Johnny a knife.
You're right. And if you take that one thing, you think about it, his character has run away from cities when things get tough. Like he's constantly running away because that's all he kind of knows. And when he's finally confronted with the situation that he can't see out of, he takes his own life. And that is like, to him, there was no way out. And again, there was no thinking it through. There was no like talking through this situation. And RJ, I'll tell you, as a psychologist who's worked with a lot of children, sometimes parents are very, very over-involved sometimes, and sometimes they are just completely hands-off, and you're like, this is part of the problem. Like, the part of the problem is that you're not here to be a guiding figure to them. You're not here that they feel like they can even talk to you when things are getting difficult. And so they do turn to things that are less than okay, less than golden.
How dare you?
Throw it in there.
Hey, listen, we have to give the people something, you know? But I think that what's also interesting about this show, before we go on to individual performances that we have to talk about, is the narration style as well. We have a story where the narrator is popping in and out. So listeners, Ponyboy is telling his story. And so sometimes he's talking to the audience, sometimes he's in the audience, and sometimes he's interacting with the audience, but then he's popping back into a story that is very much about his life. And RJ, it reminds me a lot of Liberation, you know, where she's talking to the audience, she'll pop back in. This one doesn't exactly feel like a memory show, but does the narration style work for The Outsiders?
Well, I think it's more simplistic in The Outsiders. Liberation to me, while it was a little bit more subtle going with the in and out, whereas with this, it was like everyone froze or it was in slow motion. Like it was very clear that it was being narrated rather than lived in, or vice versa. So I thought it worked. I think people enjoyed that like full circle moment, which we get with this as well. And they just automatically feel more engaged. Like him coming up the aisle, walking through the theater, and then, ending the way it does. Like it's just people, it adds that level of intimacy rather than just like watching it happen from with that fourth wall still there.
Emily, before I get your opinion real quick, I just want to let you know that when he was walking down the aisle and he, gets up there, and I knew that like the song, and we're talking more about the music in part 2, but I knew that the song began with, I've never been out of Tulsa before. And I knew that was also the ending of the show. And I legitimately started sobbing in that first second as soon as he started singing for no reason other than the fact I knew what was coming at the end of the show. And I was like, what is wrong with me here? It was so strong for literally 2 seconds. I was like, oh, he's walking down the aisle. It's totally fine. And then lost my ever-loving mind as soon as he started singing.
You have to. When it's that good, you have to.
Did you like that narration style? As someone who hadn't seen the show before, did it feel natural to The Outsiders?
Certainly. I think having like one main guy telling you stuff is like a pretty classic thing to do in at least contemporary musicals. Certainly not in like the Renaissance era of things, but I liked like the beginning and the end of the bookends of the show really, really reminded me of reading the book for the first time and like having my 7th grade mind blown when like at the end of the book, you're like, oh my gosh, this is Ponyboy's notebook. Like this is the thing. And so I think there's obviously a little less shock when he's been narrating it the whole time. But I really like that full circle moment, right? It's perfect, ties it all together. You see how far he's come. It's great, warm.
Absolutely. It truly is like, it's that full circle moment, where it's like, it's the circle of life, but for The Outsiders, it just, and what's interesting is that Julie Taymor's daughter was involved in this production, and Julie Taymor was the choreographer for The Lion King. And
no way.
So, yeah, she was a choreographer for The Outsiders. So it's interesting that we have this moment of kind of, two things at the same time in Detroit, and we love that. I do think that it adds like a level of authenticity to the show when it feels like it's actually Ponyboy's story, especially when he hands that book off to the person in the crowd, because it's like passing off that it's like very meta. I'm passing off this book that you've all already read pretty much. And in that moment, you're now a part of that story. So I do think the narration works really well. I think RJ, you're 100% right. It works better than Liberation does because it feels more natural to the story. And part of that could be because the novel itself is told in first person, so that does give it that authenticity feel.
And kind of like gives Daryl and SodaPop a reason to be like, yeah, you're a good writer. You have to go to school. It's like, yeah, we've been listening to your writing this whole time. It's pretty great.
We know you are going to be a good writer.
Go to school.
Yeah. Or, just, during COVID, stumble into it and start writing. And that happens too. So obviously we have to talk about the performances, and we're talking about the acting aspects because we're going to get to the vocals in part 2. Stay with us, people. We'll get there. This is such a cliche answer to say, but I think I was most blown away by Nolan White. I think that it was because when RJ and I saw The Outsiders on Broadway, we had an understudy, no slight against the understudy, but this one felt like Nolan understood Ponyboy a little bit more, probably because maybe he was been living in it for a little bit longer. So that was really a standout for me. Along with Johnny Cade, I thought Johnny Cade, Benel from Branny, it was fantastic. But Emily, what characters really stood out to you, or why did their stories resonate with you the most?
I was absolutely blown away by Tyler Jordan Wesley's Dally. oh my gosh, like the second he was on stage, it felt like I'm just watching him. It was fantastic. The way that he commanded the stage is the same way he commanded the Greasers. It's just, oh my gosh, it was amazing.
He was really good. I think Daly is such a hard character to pull off because he can almost feel very one-dimensional. You know, he could just be a very angry person. And there was kind of like a soft side to this Daly.
For sure. Yeah, he wanted to help Johnny. Like he wants to help them all. He wants them not to feel like that anymore. But, you know, things happen.
Things happen.
Things happen.
RJ, comparatively from Broadway, what roles really stood out to you this time?
Comparatively.
Or you could just tell me who jumps out at you in the show, and why is it Cherry? Why is it SodaPop? Because that's everybody should be watching it for SodaPop.
Oh my gosh, the collective audience like sigh.
Oh,
I can't.
I don't think that happened. Well, again, I was very sick and just maybe not in tune. But yeah, the audible from the audience in Detroit versus even New York, I feel like it was greater in Detroit. I don't know if it's because people weren't expecting it. And so, but I was like, okay. I mean, I like go off, but like, I don't care. So
listen.
Well, some of us out there did care. So
clearly,
I'm not gonna name names, but someone did text RJ and said, "I know why Brian likes the show so much," and I said it was for the plot. It was for the plot of those 6-pack apps. So
yeah, as I say, I can think of 6 plots right now that Brian enjoyed.
Absolutely, I was like, yeah, I remember why the show was so good.
But all that to say, man, I don't know. I think I was just impressed with the youthfulness of this cast. Like so many of them, in reading the bios, like so many of them were newer to Broadway stages or a touring stage.
They're babies.
So yeah, they're just like either in college or fresh out of college or just barely, like a lot of debuts. And the chemistry overall felt authentic. Which for a show that hasn't been running very long felt impressive, especially given the age. So I guess I would say that because, like, honestly, so many of them, they're all incredible. And vocally, I feel like they were all at the same caliber. I'm not sure if anyone stood out to me particularly, but yeah,
I will agree.
I believed that they were family. I believed that they had been like hanging out for some time.
I will 100% back that up, where I thought that the chemistry between this cast was just incredible. And I think it kind of goes back to when I was interviewing Nolan White. He was talking about how he doesn't start a show before finding Johnny Cade for sure, but I'm pretty sure he also finds Tyler, who plays Dallas, and they all have to hug before they go out on stage. Like that's like one of the rituals is they have to hug. And then as I was interviewing him, at one point, Nolan paused the microphone to talk to somebody. And he's like, we're all in like these rooms together. Like, whereas sometimes I feel like when you get to be like certain shows or you get to be like a big enough actor, you get your own room. You get to go do your own thing. And this one, they felt like almost like, you know, like when you were in like high school or middle school and you went on those trips together with your friends to like Washington, D.C. or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it kind of feels like a little bit. Like you're here with your friends, you're having a good time, you're having the time of your life together. And that really showed in the chemistry that was being built on stage with these actors.
Mm-hmm. It is like the little things that make those moments feel legit, where it's like, yeah, of course it seems like your friends on stage, your friends off stage too.
Mm-hmm. Like they all were fangirling when Corbin took off his shirt, and we were right there with them. And with that, we are running out of time. But stay tuned for part 2 of our Outsiders discussion. But before we go, Emily, where can the people find you?
On Instagram at Emily_Grace44. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us here in our box seats. Until next curtain call.